All right, hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Currently, we are in the 1 Kings chapter 11, and we're going to see the sad end of Solomon, a man who is the wisest man, was gifted with the wisest mind, the wisest wisdom, right? The most wisdom. And we're going to see his foolishness, and it is a interesting wonder that how could a man who is so wise end up being so foolish. We're going to see this as we move on, but at some respect, we could say Solomon totally backslides. And again, so later on in another book, we're going to see how Solomon talks about this. In my wisdom, in other words, he said, in my foolish, I was doing A, B, and C, yet I'm still understanding the wisdom. And the only thing I could say as an answer to this is that despite anything that you could do in this earthly realm in this time, that you have to understand the sinful nature. Okay? The sinful nature. Right? That we can be as wise and yet sin overtakes us. Let's get into it. Chapter 11. Okay, verse 1 says, Solomon loved many foreign women in addition to Pharaoh's daughter, Moabite, Amorite, Edomite, Sidonian, and the Hittite women from the nations that the Lord had told the Israelites about. Do not intermarry with them, and they must not intermarry with you, because they will turn you away from me to their gods. And Solomon was deeply attached to these women and loved them. Now, again, so sad, because so the biggest question, how could a man so wise fall for this? In other words, why wouldn't he have the wisdom to see? And by the way, this is love. We're talking about this is love. Solomon was into the ladies. Okay? Verse 3. And to me, the sinful nature. Okay. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines, and they turned his heart away from the Lord. Here's the thing about this too. You have to know that there's details that we are not getting into here. But Solomon, because remember, these were not godly women. And the sad thing, of course, is that Solomon will, let's go let the scripture speak for itself. Verse 4, when Solomon was old, his wives seduced him to follow other gods. He was not completely devoted to Yahweh, his God, as his father had been. Again, amazing, right? But don't judge, because remember, every one of us could fall in the same kind of level of foolishness, sinfulness. Verse 5, Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the detestable idols of the Amorites. Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. And unlike his father David, he did not completely follow Yahweh. And at the time, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, and for Milcom, now the detestable idols of the Amorites, and on the hill across from Jerusalem. Now, these detestable idols could have been perverse idols, okay? I think in one case it's genitals, to kind of show you something like that. and their practices as well. In other words, they did all these things. Most pagan religions have some type of sexual perversions involved in their worship. So it'd be like, if honey, I'm going off to worship, it was perversion. Okay, women were just as bad as too. So, verse 8. He did the same for all his foreign wives who were burning incense and offering sacrifices to their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon. Now remember that prayer he prayed. Remember that prayer he prayed that when we sinned. Remember that prayer, right? The prayer he prayed in the dedication. Verse 9, the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from Yahweh, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. He had commanded him about this so that he would not follow other gods. But Solomon did not do what the Lord had commanded him. And then the Lord said to Solomon, since you have done this and did not keep my covenant and my statutes which I've commanded you, I will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. However, I will not do it during your lifetime because of your father David, and I will tear it out of your son's hand. And we will see this in the very next chapter. Yet I will not tear the entire kingdom away from you, and I will give you one tribe. I will give one tribe to your sons because of my servant David, and because of Jerusalem that I chose. So the Lord raised up Hadon of the Edomites as an enemy against Solomon, and he was of the royal family in Edom. Earlier, when David was in Edom, earlier when David was in Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, had gone to bury the dead and had struck down every male in Edom. For Joab and all of Israel had remained there 6 months until he had killed every male in Edom. Hadon fled to Egypt along with some Edomites from his father's servants, and at the time Hadon was a small boy. Hadon and all his men set out from Midian and went to Paran. And they took the men with them from Paran and went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadon a house, ordered that he be given food, and gave him the land. Pharaoh liked Hadon so much that he gave him a wife, the sister of his own wife, Queen Taphanes. And Taphanes' sister gave birth to Hadon's son, Genubal. And Taphanes herself weaned him in Pharaoh's palace. And Juvenal lived there along with Pharaoh's sons. And when Hadon heard in Egypt that David rested with his fathers, and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, Hadon said to Pharaoh, let me leave so I can go to my own country. But Pharaoh asked him, what do you lack here with me for you to go back to your own country? Nothing, he replied, but let me leave. God raised up Rezon, son of Elah, as the enemy against Solomon. He had fled from his master Hadazezer, king of Zobah, and gathered men to himself. He became captain of a raiding party when David killed the Zobites. He went to Damascus, lived there, and he became king in Damascus, rather than was Israel's army throughout Solomon's reign, adding to the trouble Hadon had caused. He ruled in Aram, but he loathed Israel. Now Solomon's servant, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, was an Ephraimite from Zeradah. His widow mother name was Zeria. Jeroboam rebelled against Solomon, and this is the reason he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the supporting terrace and repaired the opening in the wall of the city of his father David. Now the man Jeroboam was capable, and Solomon noticed the young man because he was getting things done. So he appointed him over the entire labor force of the house of Joseph. During the time, the prophet Ahijah, the Shulamite, Shilonite, met Jeroboam on the road as Jeroboam came out of Jerusalem. Now, I don't know why I'm having a hard time. Ahijah had wrapped himself with a new cloak, and the two of them were alone in the open field. Then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he had he had on, tore it into 12 pieces, and said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord God of Israel says. I'm about to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand, and I will give you 10 tribes. But one tribe will remain his because of my servant David, because of Jerusalem, the city I chose out of the tribes of Israel. For they have abandoned me. They have bowed the knee to Ashereth, the goddess of the Syrians, Shemash, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Amorites. They have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my eyes, and to carry out my statutes and my judgments as his father David did. However, I will not take the whole kingdom from his hand, but will let him be ruler all the days of his life because of my servant David, whom I chose, and who kept my commands and my statutes. I will take 10 tribes of the kingdom from his son's hands and give them to you, and I will give 1 tribe to his son, so that my servant David will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city I chose for myself to put my name there." Now, stop. So this prophecy we're going to see come to pass coming up in the next chapter. So the end of Solomon's life here is quite tragic to me because of his idolatry. He just fell into straight idolatry and pagan worship. The wisest man. This is okay. Now Jeroboam, it's not going to be much better, and we're going to see this going on later on with him. Okay, verse 37. "And I will appoint you, and you will reign as king over all you want, and you will be king over Israel. And after that, if you obey all I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right, in my sight, in order to keep my statutes and my commands, as my servant David did, I will be with you. I will build you a lasting dynasty, just as I built for David, and I will give you Israel. I will humble David's descendants because of their unfaithfulness, but not forever." Now, this will eventually become known as the northern kingdoms. So Jeroboam, the 10 tribes, he will reign over what's called the northern kingdom, and then the Judea, or what's called Judea, Jerusalem, will be left in the house of David. Now, this is here. So, therefore, verse 40, therefore Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, and he fled to Egypt, and Shishak, king of Egypt, where he remained until Solomon's death. Now, again, we're going to come back to this, and we'll see 2 stories told, one from the Kings, and then also one from Chronicles, because the Chronicles would be from the kings of Judah, okay, which is the line of Jesus. This is why that's important. And it's going to be quite the topsy-turvy, right? It's going back and forth here. But it is sad. Therefore, Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam. And all of this is going to set into play. Solomon has trouble for the rest of his life. Solomon lived in a time of peace. And yet, all of a sudden now, because of his sin, he's having to fight wars. He's wrestling with... It's just amazing. All right, look at verse 41. "The rest of the events of Solomon's reign, along with all his accomplishments and his wisdom, are not written in the book of Solomon's events." We don't particularly have this book. "The length of Solomon's reign in Jerusalem over Israel was a total 40 years. Solomon rested with his father with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And Rehoboam became king in his place. So we're going to see the difference between Jeroboam and Rehoboam as we move forward. But amazing, again, it is totally amazing how such wisdom can be corrupted. How Solomon can have such wisdom and then yet do that. And remember, he just doesn't fall, he falls hard. He falls, he's worshiping some of the worst of the pagan gods. That they're doing some of the worst pagan sins that you could do. As I said, all of pagan worship is pretty much sexual perversions, violence in this worship, right? These false gods and stuff. And Solomon fell prey to all of them. He had 700 wives and fell prey to these 700 distinct pagan philosophies and worship. It's just amazing. All while being the wisest man on the face of the planet. Now that said, the only answer I can offer for that is the sinful nature of man. That though God did bless him, that did not overcome his sinful nature. Okay? That did not overcome his sinful nature. But it is a very interesting fall from grace, to say the least. Okay? A very interesting fall to grace. Alright guys, we'll pick it up and then moving on. Actually, you can say this kind of ends the kind of David dynasty. We're going to get into Solomon's son, and he will be a stone fool. But, alright guys, don't forget to like and share this video. Subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Hit that subscribe button. Welcome all your comments. All comments are welcome. See you in the next study. All right.